In the twilight of his life, Moses stood atop the rugged heights of Mount Seir, a desolate range carved by time into jagged cliffs and windswept valleys. This mountain overlooked a land that shimmered with promise, a land whispered about by prophets and dreamed of by generations, yet a land Moses would never step foot upon. Below him stretched the vast plains of the Promised Territory, fertile and green under the golden sun, far beyond the parched wilderness where he had shepherded his people for 40 long years. Moses' eyes traced the horizon from the lush hills of Shechem to the distant palm-lined banks of the Jordan River, and even farther to the vibrant orchards and vineyards nestled in the valley of Jericho. It was the land God had vowed to give to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But for Moses, it was a distant dream, a horizon forever beyond his reach. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft whisper of the wind through the dry grasses. It was here, in this solemn solitude, that Moses felt the weight of his years and the gravity of his journey. He had been a servant of God, the chosen deliverer of Israel, the voice of divine law to a rebellious people. Yet one moment, a moment of disobedience had barred him from entering the land of promise. The memory returned with vivid clarity. It was at the waters of Meribah, the arid desert where thirst gnawed at the people and faith waned. The congregation of Israel, weary and desperate, had turned their gaze accusingly toward Moses and Aaron, their voices sharp with blame. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in this wilderness? There is no water to drink, no hope for us here," they cried. Moses, burdened by the endless complaints and their despair, sought the Lord's guidance in the sacred tent of meeting. The Lord's voice had come clear and commanding, "Take your staff, assemble the people, and speak to the rock before their eyes. It will yield water." Yet in that moment, frustration surged within Moses, a tempest of weariness and indignation. Instead of speaking, he struck the rock twice with his staff, water gushing forth, quenching the people's thirst. But the Lord's voice soon thundered back in rebuke, piercing through the cool desert air. "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them." This single act of disobedience, born of human frustration, sealed Moses' fate. Now, standing on the edge of the land, Moses wrestled with the bittersweet reality of his leadership, the triumph of guiding a nation from slavery to freedom, and the sorrow of knowing he would not cross the final threshold. Beside him stood his brother Aaron's son, Eleazar, a young priest entrusted with sacred duties and charged with carrying the legacy forward. Unlike Moses, Eleazar's path would lead him into the fertile valleys below, where the tribes of Israel would finally settle and thrive. "Moses," Eleazar said softly, sensing his uncle's inner turmoil, "the Lord's plan is mysterious, but his ways are just. Your obedience in all other things has carried us here. The promise is ours because of your faithfulness." Moses smiled faintly, but his eyes remained distant. Faithfulness, even when it costs the very thing one has fought for. It is a bitter cup, Eleazar, but God's holiness is not to be taken lightly. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the land, Moses raised his staff once more, this time not in anger, but in reverence. With a final prayer, he turned away from the promised land, ready to complete the final chapter of his earthly pilgrimage. The story of Moses is one of profound faith, obedience, and the heavy burden of leadership. It is also a story that warns of the consequences of failing to honor the holiness of God, even in moments of weakness. But beyond the judgment lies a deeper truth. God's mercy endures, and his plans unfold with perfect wisdom. Join us as we journey through the life and legacy of Moses, exploring the lessons embedded in his story, lessons of faith tested, pride humbled, and grace extended. Together, we will uncover timeless truths that continue to inspire and challenge believers today. The evening shadows lengthened across the desolate slopes of Mount Seir as Moses sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the flickering campfires below where the Israelites had made their final encampment. The murmurs of the people drifted upward, voices of exhaustion, relief, hope, and fear mingling in the cool desert air. Among the crowd were faces that Moses had known for decades, warriors who had fought battles for freedom, mothers who had borne children in the wilderness, elders whose wisdom had guided the tribes through endless uncertainty. Yet the atmosphere was restless. For all their faith in the God who had delivered them, murmurs of doubt and discontent still threatened to fracture the fragile unity. Moses' heart was heavy with this knowledge. Leadership had never been easy. It was a sacred trust and a crushing weight, especially when he could no longer offer the ultimate prize, entrance into the promised land. "Uncle Moses," a voice called softly beside him. It was Natan, a loyal scout and messenger, a man of quiet courage who had proven his faithfulness through many trials. "The people look to you still, even now. Some question your authority since you cannot lead them into the land. Others whisper of rebellion." Moses sighed deeply. Rebellion, a serpent's poison that creeps into every camp, especially when hope wavers and the path seems blocked. Natan nodded gravely. "They have gathered again near the valley. They demand answers. Why must Moses be denied, they ask. What has he done to deserve this punishment?" The murmurs grow louder each day. The memory of Meribah burned fresh in Moses' mind. That moment of anger, of failing to trust God's word fully, it was a wound that could not be undone. Yet Moses had never ceased to intercede for the people, praying fervently that their journey would not end in despair. "We must meet them," Moses said, "not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a shepherd whose heart aches for his flock." Together, Moses and Natan descended the rugged trail toward the gathering crowd. As they approached, the murmurs grew into voices raised in challenge and accusation. Among the crowd was a fierce woman named Miriamna, a leader of the women who had stood strong alongside Moses through every hardship. Her voice rang clear above the others as she spoke boldly. "Moses, our deliverer, we honor your sacrifices, but why must you be punished so? Is this justice from our God? Does he not see your years of faithfulness? We fear for the future if the man who brought us from slavery is cast away." Moses looked into Miriamna's eyes, seeing both strength and the raw pain of a people on the edge of hope and despair. "I share your pain, Miriamna," he replied softly. "The Lord's holiness is beyond our full understanding. It demands reverence from all, even the greatest among us. I have fallen short, and for this I accept his judgment." An elder named Jorah stepped forward, his voice shaking with age and emotion. "Moses, if not you, then who shall lead us when you are gone? Aaron has passed from us, and Eleazar is young. We need assurance, a sign that God's promise still stands." Moses nodded. "God's promise endures beyond any one man. Eleazar is chosen to carry the priesthood forward, and Joshua, son of Nun, is appointed to lead you across the Jordan. Trust in them as you have trusted in me." The murmurs softened as hope rekindled in the eyes of the people, yet the shadow of uncertainty lingered. That night, alone by a flickering fire, Moses prayed with fervor. "Lord God, maker of heaven and earth, I have walked with you, spoken with you face to face, yet now I stand on the edge of your promise, denied entry. Teach me, O Lord, what it means to serve with humility and to honor your holiness above my own desires." Suddenly, a presence stirred beside him. A stranger cloaked in shadows, his face hidden beneath a hood. Moses did not recoil, but sensed something otherworldly. A messenger, perhaps, or a test. "You have served well, Moses," the figure spoke, voice deep and steady. "Yet even the greatest can stumble. The path to the promised land is not won by might or merit, but by faith and obedience." Moses looked up, heart pounding. "Who are you?" "I am Zadkiel, an angel sent by the Lord to remind you the journey continues beyond the land. Your legacy is not bound by borders, but by the faith you have sown." Moses felt a wave of peace wash over him. The burden remained, but so did the call to persevere. "Thank you, Zadkiel, I will not falter." As the stranger vanished into the night, Moses rose, renewed in spirit. He would face the days ahead with courage, knowing that God's holiness, though severe, was also a source of unending mercy and grace. The next morning, Moses ascended again to the summit of Mount Seir to behold the land once more. As dawn broke, the sun cast a golden light over the sprawling territory, a land flowing with milk and honey, yet forever out of reach for him. Yet beyond the pain, Moses understood that his story was not an end but a beginning. His faith would live on in those who crossed the Jordan, who would inherit the covenant and build a nation under God's law. The promise of God transcended Moses' life, and in that truth, Moses found a quiet joy, a hope that no human failing could extinguish. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy stillness. Though the people of Israel stood on the brink of their long-awaited inheritance, their hearts were restless, swirling with doubt and fear. Moses sensed a growing tension among the tribes, a storm gathering beneath the surface, threatening to break apart the fragile unity forged over decades of wandering. One morning, as the sun rose blood-red over the jagged peaks of Mount Seir, a messenger arrived from the camp below. His face was pale, eyes wide with urgency. "Moses, there is unrest in the camp. A faction led by Korin, a man of influence from the tribe of Reuben, stirs the people to rebellion. They question your authority and whisper that a new leader should rise." Moses' heart sank. Korin was a man proud and ambitious, charismatic and clever. He had long harbored resentment against Moses and the established order. Now, seeing Moses barred from the promised land, Korin saw an opportunity to seize power. "Gather the elders and the leaders," Moses commanded, his voice steady despite the storm brewing within. "We must meet this challenge with wisdom and courage." In the great tent of assembly, the leaders of the tribes gathered, some loyal, others doubtful, all aware that this moment could shape the destiny of Israel. Korin stood tall, his voice ringing out with fiery conviction. "We have followed Moses through trials and triumphs, but now he stands at the edge, forbidden from entering the land he promised us. Is this the man we are to trust? Is it not time for new leadership, for those who will lead us boldly into the future?" Voices murmured agreement, but also hesitation. Moses rose slowly, his gaze sweeping the assembly. "Korin, your words reveal your heart, but also your misunderstanding. My exclusion from the land is not a failure of leadership, but a consequence of my own sin, a lesson that holiness must be honored above all." He paused, his voice growing passionate. "The promise of God is not tied to one man's steps, but to the covenant made with our fathers. Joshua, son of Nun, whom the Lord has chosen, will lead you across the Jordan. Trust in him as you trusted in me." A murmur of dissent rippled through the crowd. Korin sneered. "And who is Joshua but a soldier? We need a leader with the strength to rule, not a shadow to follow in Moses' footsteps." At that moment, a young woman stepped forward, Talitha, a healer and prophetess from the tribe of Gad. Her voice was calm but firm. "Korin, your challenge divides us at a time when unity is most needed. Moses has led us through deserts and storms, guided by the hand of God. To reject him now is to reject the Lord's plan." The assembly was silent, struck by her courage. Moses gave a faint smile. "Talitha speaks with wisdom. Let us not forget that faith, not force, is the foundation of our journey. The land belongs to God's people, not to the ambitions of men." Despite his words, Moses knew the road ahead would be perilous. The rebellion was a symptom of deeper unrest, fear of the unknown, the weight of inheritance, and the temptation of power. That night, as the camp settled, Moses walked among the tents, offering words of comfort and prayer. He found Eleazar and Joshua by the fire, deep in counsel. "Joshua," Moses said, "the people need more than orders. They need reassurance of God's presence. You must prepare them, not just for battle, but for obedience and faith." Joshua nodded. "I will, uncle. But Korin's influence grows. We must be vigilant." Eleazar looked up. We will stand firm together. The priesthood will uphold the law, and Joshua will lead in faith. Moses felt a flicker of hope amid the shadows. Before dawn, a messenger came with startling news. A mysterious stranger had appeared near the camp's edge, speaking words of encouragement and warning. The man claimed to be a servant of God, sent to remind Israel that their journey was watched by unseen eyes. Moses summoned the man. The stranger's eyes burned with a fierce light. "Moses, son of Amram, the Lord's servant," he said, "the path to the promised land is fraught with peril, not only from enemies of flesh, but from the shadows that lurk in the hearts of men. Beware the seeds of discord." Moses listened intently, sensing divine authority in the stranger's voice. "You have been faithful despite your pain," the stranger continued. "Now your legacy depends on those you leave behind. Trust in Joshua, trust in Eleazar, and trust in the covenant. The Lord will fight for his people." Before Moses could reply, the man vanished into the morning mist. Moses stood alone, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon him. The promise was near, but so was the battle, a battle not only of armies, but of faith and obedience. He raised his eyes to the heavens. "Lord, grant us strength. May your holiness guide our steps and bind our hearts in unity." Embrew. With renewed resolve, Moses turned to face the coming days, a leader stepping aside, a nation standing on the cusp of a new beginning. The sun rose over the plains with an uneasy glow, casting long shadows over the restless camp. The murmurs of dissent that had simmered beneath the surface now began to rise like a storm breaking loose. The rebellion led by Korine gathered strength, swelling with voices, hungry for change and quick to question Moses' legacy. Moses watched quietly from a distance as Korine addressed a growing crowd near the central fire. His words were sharp, laced with promises of power and renewal that appealed to the weariness and frustration of many. Why should we follow a man barred from the promised land? Why trust a leadership that has brought us so far only to withhold the very goal we sought? Korine's voice carried, bold and defiant. It is time for a new path, a path of strength, not submission. Among the crowd, doubt took root. Mothers clutching children exchanged worried glances. Warriors shifted uneasily, torn between loyalty and ambition. The delicate fabric of unity began to unravel. Moses knew he had to act. With a heavy heart, he stepped forward and raised his voice over the rising tide. "My people," Moses called, "hear me. The Lord our God has led us every step of the way. The promise of the land is not mine to give or withhold. It is his alone. The law he gave us, the covenant he sealed with our ancestors, stands firm beyond any man's will." A hush fell over the crowd, but Korine was undeterred. "Words, Moses. We need action, a leader who will conquer, not stand silent at the edge." Moses' eyes met Korine's, steady and unwavering. "Joshua, whom God has chosen, will lead you across the Jordan. Trust in him as you have trusted in me." Korine sneered. "Joshua is but a soldier. The people need more than soldiers. They need a leader who commands respect and fear." Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. It was Talitha, the prophetess, stepping boldly beside Moses. "Korine, your rebellion will bring only ruin. The land is not won by force alone, but by faith and obedience to the Lord. The covenant is not broken by Moses' absence, but carried forward by those who honor God's law." Her words struck deep, piercing through the growing unrest. Some began to waver, others to reconsider. Moses seized the moment. Remember the miracles, the plagues, the parting of the sea. Did these happen by chance? No, they were signs of God's power and faithfulness. Do not let pride and rebellion blind you to his holiness. The crowd fell silent, the firelight flickering against faces etched with doubt and hope. But the rebellion was not so easily quelled. That night, Moses received word that Korine and his followers had gathered weapons, preparing to challenge Joshua's leadership by force. Moses called Eleazar and Joshua to his side. The time has come to stand firm, not with anger, but with the justice of God. We must face this trial as one people, united in faith. Joshua nodded, resolve hardening his youthful features. I will lead as the Lord commands. The battle is not ours, but his. Oh. The next morning, the two camps faced each other across the dusty plain, rebels against faithful followers, ambition against obedience. Moses stood between them, his voice ringing clear over the tension. People of Israel, cease this strife. Let not pride and rebellion sever the bond we share as God's chosen. Remember that disobedience brought wandering and loss. Turn back from this path and walk in the ways of the Lord. Corin stepped forward, sword raised. If you will not yield, then prepare to fight. Before the first clash, a sudden calm descended. A wind rose, swirling dust into the air as a voice thundered across the plain. It is the Lord's command. Stop this strife. The people fell to their knees as a radiant figure appeared on the hill, Zadkiel, the angel who had spoken to Moses in the night. His presence filled the air with awe and reverence. Israel, you are God's chosen, Zadkiel proclaimed. Let not rebellion sever his covenant. Repent and be united, or face his righteous judgment. Corin hesitated, his defiance faltering under the divine presence. Slowly, he lowered his sword. Moses stepped forward, tears in his eyes. The Lord's mercy endures forever. Let us walk together in faith, honoring his holiness. The rebellion dissolved, the people's hearts turning back to unity and hope. Moses knew the battle had been won, not with sword or might, but with the power of God's presence and the courage of faith. As the sun set, Moses looked once more toward the promised land. Though barred from crossing, his spirit soared with the knowledge that God's promise would be fulfilled through those he had prepared.